Hello, friends. This is Magda from KCKPL Library, and here is the second part of our three series about all you want to know about coffee. Welcome, Zach.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here. If you've watched the first one, you know who I am. If not, I'm Zach of Meta Coffee. We're a local roaster and have a coffee shop in town. Just opening our new coffee bar on off of the highway on 87th Street in Lenexa. Check us out over there. Today we're going to do a Brewing 101 class, how to make your at-home brewing experience kind of a little bit better, like easy ways you can upgrade to get, cafe quality coffee at your house. It's a lot more simple than you think. You don't need $1,000, machine to do anything like that. It's oftentimes a lot of the really small details that kind of impact that more than anything. So I'll just get started, and along the way, if Maggie, you have any questions, we can stop and
Yeah, I
get
took
into some.
some notes already, so I can ask you.
Excellent. Perfect. The first thing you can do, obviously, is fresh beans. That's going to be the number one thing. Fresh beans, buying whole beans and grinding it yourself is kind of your first step into that. What happens when you buy ground coffee or old beans that are even whole bean is the beans oxidize, and you lose that flavor a lot of the time. You'll see if you do a pour over. Normally, what happens when you do a pour over with fresh coffee, the first pour it gets very bubbly. It releases a lot of gas. It expands. You call it a bloom, and that's because it's fresh. It still has a lot of that. If you use coffee that's been ground already, if you use old coffee, you'll notice when you do that first pour, the water goes right through, sinks right through, goes right to the bottom. There's no expansion. There's no release of any gases of any sort. So that's kind of your number one thing of how to make better coffee. Use fresh coffee, grind it yourself. The biggest variables that you're going to see oftentimes is going to be or what you can control, at least in terms of your coffee quality. Ratios, your water to grounds ratios. Normally you're going to be somewhere between 1 part coffee to 10 parts water versus 1 part coffee to 15 parts water, depending on how strong you like it, the type of coffee that you have. You're going to be somewhere in that range a little bit, and that's what most cafes and coffee shops are going to use, is between that 1 to 10, 1 to 15 ratio. Additionally, grind size, not just grinding it yourself, but being able to grind it appropriately for the method that you're using. You're gonna change your grind size depending on whether you're doing a pour over, a French press, stuff like that, which we'll get into. And then obviously water temperature and water dispersion are going to be kind of the next big things. You want your water to be somewhere between 200 degrees and 206 degrees for brewing. If you get down to that 170, 180 part, it's going to be really rough. It's going to be hard to get the flavor profile out of the coffee. It's hard to pull that out with 180 degree water. You'll see a lot of Keurigs and stuff like that. They'll only get to about 180, 185, which is kind of one of the issues you'll find with trying to get good quality coffee out of that. And then water dispersion, like I mentioned, you want to make sure you're covering the whole ground. Some of the cheaper Mr. Coffee machines, they will just shoot a water stream right down the middle, and you'll see a lot of, when you pull out the filter, you'll see a lot of the perimeter has been untouched, while a stream of water has shot right down the middle of the grounds. So you're getting some over-extracted parts with some under-extracted parts, and that's where you're going to get a really weak, unbalanced cup. So we'll get into kind of the grind size a little bit. Obviously, the finer you go, the more extraction you're going to get, and then the more coarse, a little bit less. So you're going to use finer grind sizes for things like espresso, if you're going to do that at home. And then once you get into like pour overs, coffee makers, stuff like that, you'll err kind of in the middle, maybe a fine to medium grind. You'll have to experiment to see what works best. And then for French presses, you're going to use more coarse grind, because you are letting the grounds actually sit in the actual press and soak. So you'll get an over extracted cup pretty quickly if you go too fine with a method like that. Whereas a pour over, if it's too coarse, the water will go right through without extracting what you need it to. We kind of talked about the brewing ratios and the water temperature, so we'll kind of move on into some of our tools. So the first thing that I would suggest that you buy, that's going to, a lot of this stuff isn't going to be very glamorous, but a lot of things like a scale, I would suggest that's going to be the biggest thing for you. So we're talking about ratios to ensure that your ratios are what they need to be. You've got to measure your coffee. I know a lot of people who don't measure their coffee when making it. That would be the first step. Measure your coffee. How much coffee are you actually getting for how much water? So measure that, and then whenever you're doing a pour over of some sort, you zero the scale, pour the water over, ensure that you're getting actually how much water that you'd like for the amount of coffee that you're.
Can I ask a quick question before I forget? So
Yeah,
about the pour over, I heard it's better to run or the wet the filter first,
sure.
and then you add is it true?
Yeah, that's what I do as well. So what that does is it gets kind of the papery flavor out of the filter, but it also will attach the filter to the brewing vessel. So here's my pour over cone that I like to use. So
Uh-huh.
if you just pop in a filter in there, they come on. You have to fold them, the creases a little bit. It'll be kind of a loose filter here, and if you try to brew in that, it's kind of wonky. So if you put the filter in and you pour water in,
Mm,
that water kind of attaches the paper to the
yeah,
side of the filter,
sure.
so it stays there.
And then question number two about fresh beans.
Sure.
There is I read it either way. How about freezing them? If you buy them fresh and then you freeze them and then you grind them frozen temperature, or do you wait until they defrost, or what do you do?
I wouldn't freeze coffee. So, and the problem with freezing is the condensation that comes from thawing, because you can't brew it frozen, and so you would have to let it thaw. And with the thawing process comes condensation, and that water exposure is going to really deteriorate your coffee quality. So we suggest just kind of buying, small amounts as you need it, rather than buying Costco size bags of it. Try to use it within a couple of weeks, and
Couple of
buy
weeks.
more as needed,
So
rather
couple
than.
of weeks after roasting, and then not older.
That ideally, I mean, you can, if you have a vacuum sealed bag, you can. I would start the timer from when you open the bag.
Okay.
Ideally, the closer to the roast date as possible. But if the roast date was a month ago, but it's a
Mm.
vacuum sealed bag, by the time you open the coffee, I would use it within 2 weeks of that time frame.
Mm. I finally bought some or ordered some fancy coffee storage thingy, as we were
Ooh,
talking about last time.
yeah,
Because I usually just roll the bag up and put a
uh-huh,
clip on it,
totally.
which probably is not the best thing.
Well, we try. So on ours now, we have little Ziplocs on there, so you can open our bag, and there's a little Ziploc that you pop open and pour
Uh-huh.
it, but then you can just zip it back shut, which kind of
Uh-huh.
saves you the
Uh-huh.
hassle of trying to roll it up and put a clip and keep it from
Yeah,
getting
I
that way.
know.
But
It's
you
not
know,
very sophisticated, but
it's
what
not
do
very
we know? I
it's
can,
not very
yeah,
sophisticated, but
yeah,
you do what you can though.
mm,
Um, but yeah, so we'll with the hot coffee, we kind of talked about the pour over, and the benefit to a pour over is that you get total control of every variable. So you are in control of the water temperature, you're in control of the the ratios, you're in control of where the water goes, you're in control of every part of it. And so normally how I would do a pour over is I would obviously wet my filter, and I would set my cone here on my mug, pour my coffee in, and I would do a little pour for about 100 grams, maybe 70 to 100 grams of water,
hmm
and I would let it sit and watch it bloom for about 30-35 seconds, and that kind of allows the coffee to really release some of those gases and expand its flavor. And then I would go ahead and perform the rest of my pours till I get to that 12 ounces or however long that I'm brewing for, I suppose. And so with that, you get total control. If you really get finicky about it, this is the way to go. And there are a lot of different cones you can get. This is called a bee house. I like this one a lot. It kind of gives you a lot of room for error. Some people like V60s or Chemexes. It's all the same principles, but it's just kind of a
I
slightly
have
different.
the glass one with the stainless steel with which has holes in it, fine mesh. I should call it
Yeah.
fine mesh. But then I
Uh-huh.
still put a filter inside of it.
Yeah, and you can experiment with it. The filter is, if you like a really clean cup, it's nice because it will trap some of those oils that don't get through, whereas like a French press or something with like a metal filter will allow some more of those oils in there. So if you like that body in your coffee, it's great. But if you're not, then a paper
Mhm.
filter is probably the way to go. Um, and I think one thing I might have glossed over with when talking about our tools is a gooseneck kettle. This will allow for a really precise pour rather than like a tea kettle. It's really hard to control that. It'll just kind of splosh the water in.
Mhm.
This is my gooseneck kettle, and it's an exact temperature kettle, so you can set it to 206 degrees, turn it on, it gets exactly that hot, and then you can kind of pour it with this really nice measured spout. If you don't have an exact temperature kettle, which you don't have to, you can just get a stovetop kettle and get the water to a boiling temperature, and then set it off the heat for about 45 seconds, and that'll kind of get you to about range. You don't want it boiling; that'll scald it. But 45 seconds off the heat will get you about to what you're
Okay.
what you're
And
looking
then
for.
another question about water. If we
Mhm.
don't have spring running in your backyard, is it okay just to, the water with chlorine, or what do you do?
Ideally filtered water, but like you said, we're not always going to have access to filtered water. Yeah, the better the water quality, the better your coffee. But with that said, you're going to have to make some concessions sometimes, and we're all going to
Mm,
have to use just tap water most of the
mm,
time if we're not at a cafe or we don't have a filter set up at home. But even
mm,
a Brita or something, that's getting kind of into the nitty gritty. There's so many things you can do to improve it before you get into that, but you can definitely get into some of that and improve it that way. Um,
mhm, mhm,
but yeah, the next thing, I didn't bring my grinder out, but I think we talked about it a little bit last time. But grinding your own, obviously, a blade grinder is kind of your first step, where you get kind of a spinning spice grinder type blade. But then we also have a burr grinder, which is the next level, where you get a really consistent grind that you'll get a really fine, consistent grind with whatever you're doing. So everything extracts really well. With a blade grinder, sometimes you get some pieces that are really overly ground with
yeah.
some really big chunks in it as well. So maybe you put 30 to 35 grams in, but you're only extracting from like 20 to 25 grams of that because there's so many large chunks in there.
Mhm. Is your grinder too far away? Can you please show
No, I can grab
us?
it. Yeah, let me
Yeah,
grab it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So this is
Oh, yeah,
my
yeah,
my
yeah.
bird grinder. This is my Baratza Encore. I like it. I've had it for years, probably 15 years now. And normally you're able to control a lot of stuff. It's been through a lot. It's been through farmers markets. I used it at home every single day. You shouldn't have to replace these too often, but yeah, if you spend the $60 to $100 on a good grinder, you will generally not regret it because it's something you can use kind of forever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So we've got the pour over. We also have a French press. Some
Mm-hmm.
people really like this. They used them in Europe a lot. This was kind of the first wave of at home brewing. It's a lot easier to use rather than pouring coffee and having it go through a filter. You simply are going to put the coffee into the base of the French press, pour all the water in, and you're going to let it sit for 4 to 6 minutes somewhere, and then you put the press down and just pour it out. And so you're not gonna get as maybe as bright of a cup out of it because it's
Mm-hmm.
not you're not getting that really hot water that's hitting there and going through.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of sitting, and the water will cool as it brews. So you're going to get a really thick cup because there's not a paper filter involved, but it's not going to be a very bright or sharp flavor if that's what you're looking for. But if you like
Mm-hmm.
maybe more medium to dark roasts, French press might not be a bad way. It tends to do a lot better with a medium dark, kind of roast if you want to brew coffee at home and you're going to use a more coarse grind, like I mentioned, because you're letting it set for a little while. Um, you can also do cold brew at home really well. A lot of people get really intimidated by cold brew. You kind of have your three options that you could do. You've got like a toddy style, which is where you're going to soak it. You normally do on large scale, it's pretty much a bucket of water with a mesh filter and a paper filter, and you're going to let a pound of coffee to about a gallon of water sit for 24 hours. You can do that on a micro scale at home using your French press. You're not going to put hot water in. You're going to put room temp water in, and you could just fill up the. You can do the math to bring down a gallon to a pound. And just put that coffee in, pour the water in, and let it sit for 24 hours. Plunge it. It's good for about a week or so. So that's another benefit is you can make coffee ahead of time, put it in the fridge, and it's good to go. In the summer, it's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
You could also do my favorite, which we do at our coffee shop, is a Kyoto cold brewer. It's out of Japan, and it's kind of a more sciencey looking glass tower. I don't have one here. We have one at the shop, but really tall, really beautiful piece of machine, and it drips one drop every few seconds, every about 7 seconds or so over the course of 12 to 24 hours to get this really fine coffee. That's probably a more advanced coffee making method. It's simple to use, but they're not cheap, and it's something that you're not going to dive into unless you're really getting into the coffee situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last cold brew method would be a flash brew, where you're just going to do your standard cold brew setup, but you are going or your pour over setup, but you are going to take a third of your water content. So if you're doing a 12-ounce pour over, you're going to take 4 ounces of that and just put ice cubes in the bottom of your cup, and then you will just pour 8 ounces of water into the grounds. So you get a more concentrated coffee that will then be cooled as you brew it. Give it a stir, throw some ice in there. Really quick, awesome way to get really good tasting cold brew, high quality cold brew at home, just using your pour over without having to plan ahead too much.
Well, first time, like, I don't know, maybe it's 15 years ago at Crested Butte, I saw in a coffee shop this elaborate glass like drip thingy, and
Yep,
it was like in a chemistry lab, like, and I was
absolutely.
like, what are they doing here? But then you wait for 20 minutes for a cup of coffee. you
Yeah,
know
it can get pretty wild. I mean, there's a lot of wild looking. I mean, stuff we didn't go over is some of the more novel concepts. Like there's a siphon that might be something that you saw where there's like a Bunsen burner over a glass beaker with a glass
yes,
container,
yes, yes.
and that might be something like that. And it looks awesome. The quality isn't going to get you any. I mean, really more quality than a pour over. It's like it's going to be about the same, but it looks awesome.
It's a
The Kyoto
conversation piece. You go to a
it's a
cool
total conversation piece.
you go to a cool coffee shop, to
Yeah, it's true. And in our Kyoto, I think makes the best cold brew, our large glass tower. But that's also a conversation piece. It's very interesting. At our shop, we do we try to focus on pour overs and cold brew, and that's going to be kind of the emphasis of what we do. A lot of manual
Mhm.
brewing, not a lot of machines. And it's interesting. It's very simple stuff that we do, but it
Mhm.
looks really daunting if you've not seen it before. But it's kind of cool.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, kind of the brewing details. Hopefully, a lot of that made sense. Where it's just kind of grind size, water temperature. Make sure you're understanding. We also have a nice little book that we made or that we put together for a brewing guide. We sell these at the shop. Kind of gives you an idea. Everything that we've talked about today, it'll go into more detail and give you step-by-step instructions as to how to do all of these things at home. Just in case you need a little reminder, it's kind of like a little recipe book.
Yeah, if you hold it up, or it's also on your shirt, the name of your coffee shop.
Oh
As
yeah,
I say, you are the original Meta coffee, the
that's
original Meta.
the original meta from. I thought I was being clever 15 years ago, and
I know, I
I
know.
wasn't. I was not being clever. Somebody thought of it after me, but
No, you
yeah,
were clever. They were just copycats.
yeah, something
Let's
like that.
see. Let's see what comes of it. But when are you opening? We should say your coffee shop will be next to the Holy Land Cafe on 87th and is it Rosewood or what is it?
It's on 87th Street. It's like 87th Parkway. It's over by Holy Land Cafe. So my dad actually owns a Middle Eastern grocery store over there, and so we will have our coffee brew bar right next to a Middle Eastern street food brick oven situation that we're opening right
Yeah.
next to it. And yeah, so we should be opening. We're planning early March.
It's
You
it's
might
a
have
great
visited our.
location. Holy Land Cafe is great food, and I shop at your grocery store. I like all those feta cheeses and all
Yeah,
those,
they're great. They're
all the
so
other
good.
cheeses. Yeah, and so this is a great location.
Thank you. Yeah,
So yeah,
it's a little
we are
different
looking
from our,
forward to it.
thank you. It's a little different from our regular, our roots were the Brookside Farmers Market, and then we did some wholesale. We opened our first shop in Rosedale, which we really enjoyed, but this is kind of a detraction from that a little bit. It's maybe a little more populated, but maybe not as hip of a neighborhood per se. But
Mhm.
we think there's a lot of room for good coffee over in that area still. We
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it's
yeah. So will you be open every day?
we're planning to do Thursday through Sunday to start, and we might open longer hours as we go, but we're going to test the demand and open Thursday through Sunday. We're planning, like I said, we're not doing espresso, which is going to be kind of unique. We're planning to solely focus on our cold brew and our pour overs and our drip coffee batch brew.
Hmm.
Espresso's great, but I feel like it kind of takes away from the purity of the coffee at times because we get caught up in the latte art and the cappuccinos and the syrups and everything.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That's totally fine.
Definitely.
There's room for all of it for sure,
No,
but
no.
we want the focus to be on the coffee as much as
Yeah.
possible, and we'll
Hmm.
we'll, we'll offer cream and milk if people
Hmm.
want it. We're not going to tell you not to by any stretch, but we do want to showcase the coffee to the best of its ability more than anything. So that's
Yeah.
kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I
Um,
totally agree. Because I used to drink like senselessly or without thought. I just put milk in my coffee, and then I quit drinking coffee altogether. And then now I just, I think this is how you taste the coffee if you don't put anything in it.
It's true, and I think a lot of the commodity coffees that you'll buy in the grocery store, that's kind of what it's made for. It's made to not be very offensive, so it will go well with milk, and you won't ask too many questions of it.
Yeah.
But once you taste it on its own, you start realizing versus higher quality coffee, like,
Yeah.
this doesn't actually taste like much. It just has a flavor of coffee.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
supposed to complement the milk with the milk and sugar that you're intended to put into
Hmm.
it. And you'll even notice some of the better coffees. There are a lot of coffees from Ethiopia that have a little bit of a berry profile, kind of a blueberryish flavor to it. Putting milk in that will not taste good. You can brew that however you want, but if you put cream, you're going to think the coffee is horrible if that's the route that you take. But really, it's an excellent coffee, but it's fighting the milk the whole way.
So
It's not.
Ethiopia is a good coffee,
They make a lot. They put out a lot of great coffee. I mean, they can make some rough coffee too. Everywhere can make really good and
but
really
it's
bad.
Arabica or is it both?
Generally Arabica.
Uh-huh.
Generally, Ethiopia is going to be Arabica coffee, but they put out some really good coffees. They just the nature in which they grow it. They don't use a lot
Uh-huh.
of pesticides in the area. They're not. They don't have a lot of the pest problems that some regions have. They won't be labeled organic, but oftentimes they
Yeah.
are. Um, but they're also their coffee production's owned by the country, so you have to go through governing bodies to get that coffee in here. Oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
they don't allow the farmers to sell directly without going through a
Mm-hmm.
governing body.
So where do you purvey your coffees from?
Yeah, we have a farm in Costa Rica that we visited and we have a personal relationship with that we normally that's we kind of our signature coffee. It's a Costa Rica Cafe Con Amor. It's that's kind of like our favorite. It's kind of got this really great citrusy, nutty chocolatiness to it, and we think it's a really flavorful, full-bodied coffee. It's my favorite. I think I probably have some bias there just because we visit the farm and we have such a good relationship with the farmers. They do it the right way, which is
Mm-hmm.
awesome. But then we also have a rotating mix of single origin that we try to do throughout the year. So we might do something from Ethiopia, we might do something from Honduras, maybe Colombia. We try to add something else to that Costa Rica throughout the year while we have it to give some
Mm-hmm.
options on pour overs and cold brew and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not against any particular region, but that we try to mix that around. But our Costa Rica
Mm-hmm.
is a staple
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
And back to the
One thing I
milk.
did want to touch on. Oh,
Go,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good.
Well, I was just going to say the milk, even like the pure tea people, you never put tea in I mean in milk into tea. It's
Hmm.
somehow the British, hopefully they are not listening to this. They tea bag and milk and sugar, and then so then you are just drinking sweet milk.
I
It has
know.
nothing to do with tea.
And I think a lot of that started with masking lower quality products. I think that happened. That's kind of how it all began, and then we got into the habit of it because it gives you a thickness that maybe you don't get otherwise. And I think however you like to drink it, by all means go for it. But I do think it's important sometime if you really do appreciate it to every once in a while try it without. It's totally
Yeah.
fine if you want to have cream in your coffee or whatever you want to do. That's everyone can do what they want, but every once in a while, just give it a shot. Just see what you think with just
Yeah.
a black coffee from a quality roaster brewed
Mm-hmm.
really well, and just kind of see what you think. See, it's good
Mm-hmm.
to check in on that.
Yeah.
And
Well, as a kind of even in the coffee and tea, we should kind of evolve as people, throughout the life. We are not supposed to be doing the same things over and over, so that's kind of
no,
like
totally.
so it's the same with, like exploring good coffees.
That's true. And you maybe there are a lot of lifetime coffee drinkers that at 50, 60 years old start dwindling down their sugar in their milk and start drinking it black. I mean, I see it all the time. That's an absolutely normal thing to see now. And I think with the amount of good coffee available to us versus what that was like 20 years ago, I think it's a lot easier to do that now. It used to
Mm.
be a lot harder to get really good coffee just at a grocery store, but you can go to a regular grocery store now and get excellent locally roasted coffee that you weren't able to do previously, where you had to find a specialty roaster, go there specifically and buy it from them. And so
Mm.
it is a lot easier now than it used to be.
And I found myself at Target the other day. But I don't go there very often. So I went to the coffee aisle just to check it out. And I guess you will not be surprised. The area which halfway empty shelves were Folgers, you know. I
Yeah, you
guess
will,
that's
and
that's what
they
the
have started adding. They have some better roasters from around the country now. Like you'll see like a Blue Bottle or a Stumptown in Target. Oftentimes it's kind of their commodity blends. You won't see a lot of single origin from them. You'll see a lot of
Mhm.
blends that they put out. But if you look at those roast dates, you check those roast dates. Oftentimes it's 2, 3, 4 months old. Even though it's bagged and everything, you're not getting it right off the roast like you're going to locally, which it's hard to go out and buy local coffee every time for sure, but with the amount of good roasters around in our city, at least, it's you should be able to find something pretty decent, with just one extra stop usually.
Yeah. So how about the Oddly Correct? There is
Oh,
a
I love
brewery. You love them?
they're outside of us. They're one of my favorites. They were
I
they do.
tried to order online. I have my best friend's husband. He's a big coffee connoisseur, and that's what he mentioned. So I went online to order from them, and they are, there is nothing to buy, so I have to venture out and buy it in the store. I
Yeah.
think they are in between shipments or roasting or something. And then somebody said Trader Joe's has a good coffee. It has a bird on the front of
Interesting.
it.
Yeah, they have good and bad. You can get
I
both.
guess the bird is called toucan in English.
Ah,
I
interesting.
forgot which. I don't want to go through my phone now, but it's my another field trip to Trader Joe's. I want to try that coffee.
Yeah, it's fun to do that. It's fun to go just kind of try all of it and see what you land on. But I've seen good and bad there for sure. Normally you're gonna have better luck at Trader Joe's if you try to find single origin and you try to find something that's not been roasted too dark. A lot of
Yeah,
the time with those darker roasts at some of these more large scale companies, you're gonna see more blends and kind of commodity roasted a little dark to
oh
mask the flavor a little
really?
bit. Yeah. So
I told you we did the flights during COVID. We were bored to
Yeah.
death, so we were doing sardine flights and coffee
Yes.
flights, and so and we somehow discovered dark. We like dark roast because we don't like acidic French type
Sure.
coffee. And now last time you said dark roast is actually not good, so I have to explore.
Well, and it's not that it's not good. You can do it well. I would say overly dark isn't good. I'd say there,
Okay.
if you like a Starbucks dark is very different from like, you know, maybe what we would consider a dark or what, maybe an oddly correct would consider a dark. Starbucks medium is a very dark for a lot of roasters, because they are intentionally adding that smokiness to the coffee so you're not tasting a lot of it. But I
Mm.
think there's no problem with a little dark coffee. I think oftentimes you want a green coffee that lends itself well to dark. Not every coffee can be dark and be tasty, but you get, like your Sumatras, your Brazils, a lot of those you can go a little bit darker and still get that natural nuttiness
Well,
to
that's
it.
what I was going to say. At the Starbucks, I told you my neighbor across the street used to work at Starbucks, and so they get like pound of coffee a week or something. So she used to bring me Sumatra dark roast, and we really like that. So during COVID, you kind of grabbed what you could. So I ordered
Sure.
5 pound or 10 pound bag of Sumatra from New York. But once again, it had a clip on
Yeah,
top
of
of it.
course.
But I mean, we really liked it, and I don't think either the coffee is no longer available or the price went up like 3 times as everything else.
In Brazil, especially, the prices have gone up. I
But
mean,
this
we've
was
seen our
Sumatra. This was Sumatra, so I guess it's from Java. So is it? Is it?
Java is another region Java and Sumatra are different regions within Indonesia, and
Oh,
so
I
they
see.
each put out their own
Oh,
coffee.
I see. I thought
But
Sumatra was on Java.
I, I'm not super
I don't
familiar
know.
with the
I
geography.
don't
It
know.
could be, but yeah, they both kind of put out their own, and you get a lot of earthy tones from their coffee. So it does lend itself well to a slightly darker roast
Oh,
if you're
good,
gonna.
good. At least I'm not a total hillbilly drinking
No, 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 no.
roast dark coffee.
Yeah, ones that don't lend itself well. I like I mentioned, like Ethiopian coffee is not often great dark. Maybe a little bit in a blend, but yeah, I'd say Sumatra and Brazil. Oftentimes, when I've seen dark roast done really well, those are kind of your prime components of it.
I see. I see.
Yeah. One thing I was gonna just touch on a little bit is like if you are insistent on machine brewing, like if all the manual stuff is a little tricky, and you insist on a machine brewer, maybe you wake up at 5 in the morning for work, and the idea of like you know heating up a kettle and grinding coffee and do a manual pour is just too much for you. You can get decent machines now. You don't need to spend $500 on a good machine, but the variables that you're going to look for is also they're the same variables that we're talking about with pour overs. But you can get like a Cuisinart, stuff like that, KitchenAid. They put out decent enough machines that get close to the right temperature, at least not always exactly the right temperature, but you're going to look for those same water dispersion. Ideally, they're not just downpouring the water. You want to see if you can get specs on the machine to see how hot the water gets. That's really important. um, it's you just have to do a little homework is all. But a
Hmm.
lot of your Mr. Coffees, whatever you're going to find at Walmart, it's going to not probably give you what you're looking for. And oftentimes, when you try to make coffee on something like that, you're going to blame the beans. You're going to say this coffee is really bad. Oftentimes, poorly brewed coffee gets mistaken for the
Hmm.
coffee itself being bad. And
Yeah, good point.
it's something to think about just whenever you're brewing something, that it's not always the beans. Sometimes it's what you're brewing it on, or maybe you need to recalibrate your grind sizes or your water temperature or whatever it may be to get
Hmm.
closer to what it is that you're looking for. Like I
Very
said, there
good.
is a whole section in our book about that, picking out a machine and stuff like that. I would avoid Keurig like the plague. I would avoid Nespresso like the plague. Not great for the earth. The coffee quality is kind of rough. They don't particularly pay a premium to their farmers for their coffee.
Yeah, and
I
also it's like it runs through plastic. So who wants to drink through heated plastic? And then
Yeah,
they
there is
say,
that part.
and then they say their cups are recyclable. Actually, they are not. or compostable. There are New York Times articles about it. So it's like recycling plastic bags, which are actually not ever recycled.
Yeah, it's there's a lot going on. There's a lot of waste produced with single use pods, and I know it's super convenient to get a hot cup of coffee by just pushing a button and putting a little plastic cup in a thing.
Mhm.
But if you can avoid it, your coffee quality is going to increase drastically. Your carbon footprint will be a little lower, and yeah, you're not drinking microplastics as well, which is another
Plus,
small.
also it traps mold, so you have to clean it frequently, right?
I've heard that. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I have heard people talk about that.
I
So
never had that. I don't, by default, I just stay away from gadgets like this.
it's easy. It's easy to get into the habit of it because I do get it. I know a lot of people drink coffee first thing in the morning, and you get up and you're tired, and that's all you want. It's really easy to go over there and pop it in and have your coffee ready to go. But
Hmm.
if you can break the habit, hopefully some of what we've talked about makes it a little more accessible to maybe try to approach brewing some at home. Even if you buy a better machine, that's better than going full
Yeah,
Keurig necessarily.
yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You have any other questions? Or I
This
think
is
that's kind of
it.
a lot
Yeah,
of
this is
a
it.
lot of what I wanted to hit on. I think
Yeah, this is perfect. Just remember Meta, the original Meta, 87th Street. I think it's Rose Hill. Rose Hill is the crossroad.
it
Cross
might
Street.
be. Yeah, that might
There
be.
is a Taco Bell on the corner. Is it
Yeah,
still
yeah,
there?
exactly. It's
Taco
in the
Bell.
parking lot. Totally.
Yeah. All
It's
right. So
it's a
we have
little
to.
unassuming. We're not going to have a large sign necessarily. You've got to kind of go in and look
Yeah,
for us. It's a small
yeah.
spot, but it's going to be very coffee focused. It's going to be really unique, and then we'll have some Middle Eastern street food right next to it. So
Well, very good, very good. Well, we are looking forward to checking you out. Thank
thank
you,
you.
Zach. Thank you. Nice having you again.
Yes, thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
guys. I
See you
appreciate it.
soon. Bye
See you
bye.
later.